why would I do that? And I go, I don't understand. He goes, Gary, I run a business with over 10,000 employees. I've got an accountant who's been with me for 20 years. And I stay with my accountant of 20 years because he brings value to my life. Why would I stop seeing you? Am I in a crisis? No. But I get something from you almost every single session we have.
Hello, and welcome to Local Leader TV, your go to podcast for insights and stories from top professionals shaping their industries. Each episode brings you face to face with experts who share their journey, challenges, and key strategies that lead to success. Now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Local Leader TV, your go-to podcast for insights and stories from top professionals shaping their industries. Each episode brings you face-to-face with experts who share their journey, challenges, and key strategies that led to their success. Whether you're a business owner, a professional, or someone looking to stay ahead, we're here to help you navigate the trends and opportunities that matter most. Because in today's fast-paced world, knowledge is your best tool for success. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Dr. Gary Brown. Dr. Gary Brown, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Justin. Good morning.
Well, good morning to you as well. Before we get started, let's just jump right over and take a look at your website. Dr. Gary Brown is a psychotherapist. He's a licensed marriage and family counseling specialist, all of those things. We'll talk about all of that stuff here: marital, premarital counseling, trauma therapy, anxiety, depression, all of those things. And you can visit him online by visiting GaryBrownTherapy.com. As always, we will have a link down below in the description, but he is a therapist serving people all around the Los Angeles area. And if you are in need of somebody who can help you out, and by the end of this conversation, you will hopefully have a really good concept of who he is and what he can help you with, he's the guy to talk to. So visit GaryBrownTherapy.com, which again, we will have a link in the description down below. All right. So getting those out of the way, let me jump back over here. There is again Dr. Gary Brown's website. That is GaryBrownTherapy.com. So who is this guy that I am talking with today? With over 3 decades of experience, Dr. Gary Brown is a prominent psychotherapist in Los Angeles, doing private practice. He holds a doctorate in clinical psychology. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and the majority of his practice is working with individuals and couples with whom he helps navigate the challenges and opportunities that they experience during the different phases of their lives. His work emphasizes fostering self-awareness in fulfillment fulfillment in relationships, encouraging clients to settle for more in their personal connections. Gary not only is sought after by clients, but also frequently is consulted for by colleagues in his field. And in addition to his private practice, he also serves as a crisis intervention and disaster mental health specialist, volunteering for organizations like FEMA and the American Red Cross. He's been recognized with several prestigious awards, including the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Los Angeles City Council and numerous honors and awards in the field of counseling. He's a fellow of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, a board-certified expert in trauma stress. He's also been awarded the distinction of the Fellow of the the distinction of Fellow of the American Academy of Experts in Trauma or Traumatic Stress. There we go. It's a mouthful to say. In addition to private practice, he's currently providing crisis intervention, including things with the fires that everyone is aware of out there as well. We might talk about that briefly, but that was a mouthful to say, and I'm sure I missed a lot. So my very first question to you, Gary, is just this: what did I miss?
Um, well, I love working with the media. I think my assistant said I've now done over about 600 interviews
Oh,
uh,
wow.
and written, and they're all on my website, about 100, a little over 120 articles on the human relationship.
Wow.
So I've been rather prolific in that way.
Awesome.
And I
So
enjoy working with the media. It's really fun.
tell me about yourself. Who is Gary Brown? Tell me
Sure.
about your family life. Do you have any hobbies? What's your favorite thing to do?
Got it. Definitely have a family life. Been married well above my station for a wonderful woman, marry a nurse. Great move, Gary. Eileen and I have been married for going on, we'll be 43 years this year. We have 3 adult children. Thank you. And we have 2 darling little granddaughters. Um, let's see what else. You know, I had a lot of sports injuries in my youth, so I'm kind of paying for it at this stage in my life. But I love playing golf. I just love playing golf. It's truly an addiction. But there's a treatment. Just play more golf.
Yeah. Get
So
your fix.
yeah. So there's been that, and I like to volunteer in the community. I was brought up in a family, that, middle class family that says, no matter where you are, you need to be giving back. So that's something that I've really embraced. Um, and my family, I think I am fourth of five generations of military in my family. So at least one male, whenever there's a war, at least one of us enlists. So and that goes back to the Union side of the Civil War.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
awesome.
just a little bit of background.
Oh, there we go.
Sure.
Well, Gary, let me ask you this. Obviously, we've talked a while. I have a good idea
Yeah.
of who you are and what you do, but let's just assume for a minute that I didn't know who you are. And you and I are on an elevator. We got, 30 seconds or a minute. We're going up, and I say, hey, Gary, who are you? Tell me what you do. Give me your pitch. Tell me specifically who you help. Tell me why they come to you. Tell me why they choose you. Tell me, what you offer and what areas and groups of people you really do focus on.
I love working with individuals and couples. I also do some family work as well. Um, I just really love helping people navigate all the phases of life that they encounter. I think the demographics in my practice, I think my youngest patient is like 15, and my oldest is knocking on the door of 89. Uh,
Wow.
yeah. Well, the beauty of having been in private practice for, you know, spanning several decades is that not only have I gone through my own developmental phases of life, childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, middle age, and now mature life, is I've been able to watch other people in their own developmental phases of life. And it comes with both, challenges, but also opportunities. And so I love to help people explore what the opportunities are. Of course, usually when they're coming to me, they're in some form of a crisis. And I love to help them navigate getting through that crisis. But I don't like to stop just there. And if they're open to it beyond the crisis, um, I love to help them explore what's their maximum potential personally, professionally, in their marriage, if they're married, as a single person, as a business person. So I also incorporate a bit of coaching as well. Love also to work with parents as well.
Awesome. Oh,
So
that
yeah,
makes
it's somebody asked me a while ago, Gary, you're getting up there. Yeah. And some of my buddies in the local emergency department over at Cedar Sinai. And I helped set up a crisis intervention program for the medical staff there over 25 years ago. It's a great program, still viable. But I was down in the ED one day and they said, so Gary, are you going to retire? And I go, okay, let's just put this on the table. So just put the word out because they didn't want me to retire. And I'm not going to retire. I said, you'll know I retired when you read my obituary.
there you go.
I'm going out feet first. And they were delighted to hear that. And I was delighted to say it. And they said, why is that? And I said, why would I stop doing something I enjoy doing? That never made sense to me,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and there's a large body of evidence you're probably more aware of than I am that, keeping yourself mentally engaged is part of what keeps you sharp. So when people retire, sometimes it really is like going to the farm upstate, right? I mean, when you
Right.
retire, people have a rapid decline sometimes. And so, obviously sometimes you have to retire, physical health or whatever gets in the way. Sure,
Sure.
that happens. But for a lot of people, retiring is just almost the beginning of the end, in a real sense.
It can be. And what we find is that is especially true for men. But regardless of gender, for myself, again, I'm probably repeating myself here, but it just, for me, doesn't make sense. I see some people who retire and they're thriving in retirement. And see some people, and to your point, Justin, they start deteriorating within a couple of years. They're like, just starting to fade out. But I still love the work. I still enjoy helping people, those light bulb moments. So, you know, I'm, I still have a passion for the work. I really can't imagine not doing it. Sorry, just, I just
No, that's awesome.
flip and love doing
Well,
it.
Let me ask you this to kind of come at from a slightly different angle. Then, what got you into practicing therapy? Right? Were you is this like a midlife crisis that shifted you over? Is this something you knew from the beginning you were going to get into? Is this like the third career? How long have you been? How long did you know you always wanted to be? How long did you know you wanted to be a therapist? When did it start, and what got you into the practice?
Boy, I have to back up a little bit historically here, Justin. It was not the plan. This was not like my first choice, although ultimately it has been the best choice I've made. Um, I served 2 tours in Vietnam, and we lost 5 guys in my unit. And, the whole concept of mortality really struck home for a young kid at the time, 19, 20, 21. Um, and I said, when I get out, I need to go back and I need to do something in the world that has meaning. And I didn't know what that was going to be. Um, and interestingly enough, I went back and I took a course in political science, and it kind of grabbed me. And that was my degree as an undergrad, was political science. I hadn't planned on that. And then I applied to graduate school at UCLA, went there, and I realized after the first quarter, this is not what I want to be doing. And so this might be a bit of a longer answer than you want.
No, it's all
So,
right.
okay, so I go to a career counselor at UCLA, and she talks with me, and she gives me this whole battery of assessments. What do you like to do? What are you good at? Da, 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 da. And she looked at me and she said, "Have you ever thought about working with children?" And I went, "No, I had not thought about that. I wasn't opposed to the idea. It had never occurred to me. I always enjoyed being around children, but wasn't something I thought about." So she sends me to this Montessori school in Santa Monica, and I report to the principal, and I sit down there, and she says, "Would you please go to this first grade class? They're out in the playground right now, but report to the teacher. She's in the room." So I go there, and I'm uh, sitting in a beanbag chair. She said, "Could you read to one of these children?" I said, "Of course." So the little boy next to me, the little girl next to me, both sitting on beanbag chairs, and I'm reading to them. And I'm getting really engrossed. I forget what the story was, but I got really engrossed with it. And it was kind of a
One
cute thing.
fish, two fish, red fish, blue
Yeah,
fish.
yeah, but I could tell like they were digging it. And so after a while, I guess kids started coming in from recess, and I was hearing little sounds, but I was really absorbed in telling the story. And after about 20 minutes, I look up and I see all these bright little shiny faces. And I'm going, "Oh my God, this is what I want to do. I want to become a school teacher." So, long story short, UCLA, I could apply, but this is like mid-year. This is like January. So I went back, and ultimately I applied to the School of Education at USC, got my teaching credentials there, did a little bit more graduate work. And then I taught in the inner city here in Los Angeles for about 6, 7 years. During that time, and I still had no thoughts of being a therapist at that time. I was starting to get burned out on teaching, not because of the kids, they were awesome. Um, but it was just like, I just felt like it was limiting for me. And I could see that some of the issues my kids were having in the classroom were related to things that were going on at home. And I still wasn't connecting any dots about that. But I just went, something needs to happen here to support the parents and these kids. Simultaneously with this, I was also working. I was dating someone, and she was doing some volunteer work at a psychiatric board and care facility. It was kind of a halfway house between psych hospitalization and trying to transition them into life. Um, and so we were kind of a gateway for them to do that. A pretty severely disturbed population, the schizophrenia, psychoses, things like that. Um, but so I started volunteering there, and I volunteered there for several years. And one night we're all sitting around, and many of them have become lifelong friends. I mean, this is like 50 plus years of friendship. And one of the guys said, "Hey, Gary, how you doing?" And I go, "I'm just really struggling. I just don't know what the heck to do with my life right now. I love teaching. I love the kids, but I'm getting burned out." and I need to find something else to do. And he goes, oh, and there's about 8 or 9 of us sitting around on the floor. And he says, so how are you feeling about the work you're doing here? And I went, um, I love it. I love working with, we call them clients. I love working with clients, you know. I really enjoy helping them navigate some of the challenges that they're having and helping provide them with opportunities and to see them expand and grow. You know, I'm really enjoying that. And he said, well, they're really enjoying you. I said, yay, you know, it's nice to hear. Uh, and he said, so you like the counseling part of this? And I go, yeah, I really do. And then he just stops, and everybody around the room, all my friends and colleagues are going, just kind of like waiting for me, and they're not saying anything. And all of a sudden I go, oh, oh, I'm supposed to be a therapist? And they went, no, you're not supposed to be a therapist. You are a
You
therapist.
are a
You just
therapist.
don't, you just don't have the license, degrees, and credentials yet. And I said, yes, this is what I want to do. And that was my light bulb moment. And they all started laughing and they were happy. Uh, and I said, okay, what do I have to do? I said, okay, you got to go back and get your master's degree. You got to collect 3,000 clinical hours to get your license. And then you have to pass your state boards. I go, done. So how do I start earning hours? And they said, well, actually, we've been logging everybody's hours. You legitimately, from the 3,000 hours, have 2,371 hours already. So that
Wow.
you have in the bank, we would like you to get a couple of different internships so you can have a different experience than what you're having here. So I did another internship in a group setting, and then I did a private practice internship, went back, got my master's, took my state boards, and got licensed, and here we are.
Wow.
So yeah, I took the polar route, but I finally found, you know, my why, as they say.
Yeah. That's a crazy story, but that's really cool. And yeah, it's funny because sometimes that's just how life is. It comes at you from the side, you don't even expect it, and all of a sudden you land not only on your feet, but land on your feet and doing better than you expected to be doing. So that's
Yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah, no, and I'm grateful. I mean, I'm just grateful that I found that. Um, Saddens me that many people don't find their why. So I also love to help people find their why.
That's really cool as well. That's a neat concept, and I think it's an important concept. I mean, that even connects in with what we were talking about earlier with retirement. I think some people, when they retire, they almost lose their why, right? They like, what is my raison d'être? Why am I here? What am I doing? And for
Right.
a lot of, especially men, as you said, for a lot of men, a big chunk of that is their identity as a provider, their identity as what they do, their function, etc. So when you lose that, you lose. I imagine there's a big market. Do you experience this? Do you talk with people who have retired and then need therapy because they're trying to process exactly that concept?
I do that, and it's actually a new field that's been emerging. I have a colleague of mine who I work with at Cedar Sinai, and he's since retired himself, but he's really semi-retired, and he's opened up a whole practice devoted to helping people navigate retirement and to help them make that transition. And he likes to start working with them before they retire.
That's interesting. Sorry, right,
Yeah.
right. I'm taking notes as you're talking here because it's just
And,
a
and I do
fascinating.
that, of course, in my practice, just matter of course. You know, as you imagine, I
Yeah,
have people all age ranges, and some of them are transitioning. Um, Sometimes I don't like to use the word retirement, even though I'll slip it in every now and then. Um, but really making a life transition, because retirement sounds like you're kind of given up on life. You know, I'm retired, you know, and for some people, again, it's wonderful. You know, they travel, and you know, I certainly enjoy traveling when I can, and they have other things. They have community things they like to do.
play
Uh,
golf every day,
and,
all day
and,
long.
and honestly, I've cut back on my hours. I don't work the same hours I did when I was 30 or 40 or 50. But I still have a pretty full-time practice and still doing the work. But, you know, I've throttled back. I'm pacing myself better.
Well, that's interesting. Um, I had a side question I was going to ask, and I just lost it. Anyway, it'll come to me in a minute, probably.
Oh, good.
So let me Let me ask you this. Let me transition a little bit. One of my favorite questions to ask whenever I'm interviewing somebody, and it's a little difficult, probably a little different in your particular scenario doing therapy. But I talk to a lot of clients. I talk to a lot of people who, in their process of learning their trade, have stumbled and fallen a little bit.
Sure.
You bat long enough, as they say, nobody bats 1,000 eventually.
Exactly.
And I hate to think of a therapy fail, right? But maybe you can let my listeners know about, one of the biggest moments that you would consider maybe a setback or even just a lesson learned that you learned in your process of developing your trade as a therapist. And what did it teach you, and how do you carry that forward when you're working with clients?
It's a great question. I don't see it so much as failures. I see it more as what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned? Um, and I think one of the things, and I actually discovered this late in my last internship. Um, the thing that I learned was that one size does not fit all. I was predominantly trained. I went through my own psychoanalysis. I was trained in psychodynamic psychotherapy that really focuses almost exclusively on early childhood and how that influences us as children and adults. Um, but just focusing on that doesn't seem to be enough. And so I realized some people really respond well to that form of therapy. Um, but I also saw it had some limitations. And so I really decided that I needed to adapt what I do to what people need rather than trying to get them to fit into my particular model of work. So I realized there's limitations of only having one tool in your therapeutic toolbox, as it were. And so I started cross training in multiple disciplines within psychotherapy. And that was the biggest lesson that I learned. And what that allows me to do, Justin, is to really customize what I do, hopefully to fit what people really need. And
You're saying you're a Swiss Army therapist, is it?
I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but yeah,
Well,
I'll break.
U.S. Army.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was Navy for me, but yeah. Yeah.
On behalf of my listeners, by the way, thank you for your service.
uh, Truly my pleasure. Truly, it's genetic within my family.
It reminds me, although I think it was a little more negative in the portrayal of it, it reminds me of Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. Like one member of my family has fought and died in
Yeah,
every single American. Which I thought was when you first said that, that's where I went. But I felt like that was a little more negative. But it is what it is. It's a beautiful portrayal of American history. I think that it's a good movie. Anyway,
I think it's important that we serve. It doesn't have to be the military. You can go into the Peace Corps. There's so many different ways to serve.
yeah, no,
That's
I agree with that.
one of the many ways my family likes to serve.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so let me ask you this: the flip side of what something is a setback or a failure might be, and this again might be really hard to even answer because I'm sure every person you deal with is a win, right? But what's what's one of your biggest accomplishments? What's one of the things you're most proud of? When you're falling asleep at night and you think back on the day, you think back on the week, the month, the year, your career, whatever it is. What's one of the things that really just stands out? You're like, I'm so glad that that happened. I'm so glad that things panned out that way. Is there anything in particular you can pull out of your career that would even fit that, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. I think I could respond on maybe a couple of different levels, Justin. I mean, on a micro level, it's really helping people get those light bulb moments, and those light bulb moments where they go, ah, oh, there's a different way for me to approach this. There's another way I can treat my partner that's really, going to enhance our love for one another, and you know, hopefully that happens a fair amount in my practice. Um, so I think at the micro level, that's something that sustains me and that keeps motivating me. It's really not the big moments; it's the big light bulb moments for them. But I think cumulatively over the decades, that's what keeps me going is helping people get those light bulb moments. So I can't say if I had one big major accomplishment. I mean, I would leave that to the judgment of others. I've had letters of commendation and nice reviews and all those things. But what really matters to me is how my patients, my clients, how they respond. I think they're the best judges of what my accomplishments are.
I think that's fair.
I would on a on a macro level, and this is so 80%, 85% of what I do is my private practice, in working with individual couples. About 10 or 15% of what I do is a subspecialty I have in doing disaster mental health services. So I've been doing that really since 1989. And I've worked a lot of fires, earthquakes, all kinds of natural and man-made disasters. Um, when 9/11 hit, I was asked, because I work mass casualty incidents, um, I was requested by the Salvation Army to be the first mental health, disaster mental health specialist to work on the pile in New York City after 9/11. And I would say, sorry, because this one still gets me. Um, Sometimes I get triggered by some of the stuff that I do, right? Um,
Yeah.
um, so I was working on the pile, and the first day, and they said, "Well, when are you going to start the interventions?" I go, "Well, I kind of want to tune into what the operational tempo is here and what the vibe is here." So I'm watching all the rescue workers. At that point, it was like about 3 or 4 weeks after, and I'm noticing relief workers were like collapsing on the pile, and they were getting injured. And I noticed there wasn't any hydration. And so I went to my direct report and Major Neil Timpson. I said, Neil, I said, we're a hydration station. He goes, yeah, when are you going to start the debriefings? I go, they don't need debriefings right now. They need food and water on the pile. And you're telling me that they're working 3 to 4 hour shifts on there with no water.
Mhm.
And I said, we need to develop a protocol. So I work with Salvation Army, I work with the fire department, and I work with the FBI because they wanted to preserve their crime scene. And so I developed a protocol. They all agreed to it, which was we were going to start doing outreach on the pile. And because there was like yellow tape, the proverbial yellow tape. Anyway, the bottom line is we started using that protocol. And after I left, they continued with that protocol. Injury rates went down 94.5%
Wow.
in the 8.5 months that were remaining after that. So at the macro level, I would say in my heart of hearts, that was the biggest accomplishment I made. And it was funny when I got back to LA, a lot of my mental health colleagues were going, "So Gary, tell me about all the debriefings you did." I did a few. Um, but I told them, I said, the biggest thing was developing this hydration nutrition protocol. And they said, well, that's a waste of your talents. You got a PhD. And I go, no, not a waste of my talents. This is where you have to be flexible in this area and you have to assess, hey, what do they really need right now? So it's kind of consistent with my general view is what do people need? Not supposed to take, what do I do?
Yeah.
It fits with what they need. So that's a
This is
long.
my psychology 101 level of knowledge here, but that strikes me very much as applying the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? Yeah, you need
Absolutely.
your self-actuation. You need food and water first before you can even get to that stuff, whether it's self-actualization, whether it's, meaning in life,
Yes.
whether it's digging through the pile of rubble, you've got to have the basics covered. And so you're
Yeah.
literally doing this applied psychology right there. You're just applying it to the base level.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I did a workshop the other day for a couple hundred therapists, who and all of us are volunteering and working here in LA, obviously because of the fires. And I had Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I said, make sure when you're working with somebody, in addition to exploring their trauma, the first thing you need to make sure is, are they safe? Are they secure? What do we need to do for their basic health needs? Food, clothing, and shelter. Maslow's first two hierarchy of needs.
Yep.
So
That's
you've nailed it, brother.
every so often, even a blind squirrel gets a nut, right?
I might give you some more credit, buddy.
Well, let's jump back over and talk more about the actual aspect of what you
Sure.
do. I know you do a lot of therapy. You work particularly with couples. You work with individuals.
Individuals and couples, yeah.
Exactly. So, what are some of the common, I guess I would say, challenges that couples or individuals will bring to you? What are they facing? Why do they come to you? At what point does somebody even say, you know what, I need to talk to a therapist? Like, how does that process even happen? For some people, I mean, for some people, therapy is a bad word, right? They're like, I'm a therapist. I don't need someone to, psychoanalyze me. But clearly, it's something that plays a very important part for a lot of people. So, what does that look like? How do people come to the realization they need a therapist, and what are the challenges they're bringing to you?
Gosh, there's a whole bunch in there. A great question, by the
You know,
way.
one tiny little question,
No, no, no.
just a
Uh,
yes or no, please.
Good luck with that. So I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of a famous psychiatrist, Dr. Bruno Bettelheim, and he had a wonderful quote, Justin. And his quote was, "If you can't talk about it, you can't put it to rest." And at some point in time, I guess people come to not that quote necessarily, but they come to the realization, you know what? I've been trying to handle this by myself, and oftentimes I can handle things by myself, and I don't need a therapist. And I've had other issues in my life, but something, for whatever reasons, the timing of this has brought me to a certain critical mass where, you know what? I think I need to talk to a third party. I need to talk to somebody else. And it could be any variety of things. It could be an issue in a relationship. It could be an issue of work as well as personal. It could be a parent-child issue. It could be, gee, I've been living with this guy for 7 years, or we're ever going to get married. It could be anything in the area of human relationships where someone is experiencing a challenge, and for whatever reasons, their normal coping mechanisms simply are not working. And they just need another set of eyes, and they want to get another perspective. And I think the thing that brings them is that they've reached a level of suffering that is saying to them, I'm suffering more than what I think I need to, and I need it to end. Uh, and so that's typically, in the broad strokes, what brings people to any clinician.
An interesting way to put it, but I guess that makes perfect sense. Like you do, and I've experienced this to some degree in various relationships in my life, right? I'm sure most people have if you're honest about it. There's a friction and it becomes uncomfortable, and then you wind up just stewing in it, or I don't know the way I want to put it, wallowing.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
eventually it becomes an irritation, becomes, beyond an irritation, it becomes something that becomes, I guess, even like a distraction in your day-to-day life. You can't focus on regular things anymore. And you're like, I gotta solve this somehow. And eventually you're like, all right, if I can't do it myself, I'll reach out to somebody.
yeah, and I mean, there are some common themes, and maybe I should give you a better answer than I did. I mean, a lot of it has to do with communication styles, misaligned values. Some people feel taken for granted in their relationship. Maybe difficulty being vulnerable. Maybe there's some stored up resentment. Oftentimes, not knowing what your partner's love languages are, not knowing what your own love language is. Do you like gifts? Do you like quality time together? Do you like physical touch? Do you like words of affirmation, acts of service, things like that? So uh, sometimes it's a matter of just trying to identify what those needs are, and then see what barriers there are, either externally or internally. Sometimes maybe the problem is me. What do I need to look at within me? It's easy to blame my wife, but that's kind of like a base level of response.
Yeah.
But it's only really when I'm looking in the mirror and I'm going, okay, Gary, what did you do to contribute to this issue that you're having with your wife right now? you know and it's getting people to that point where they can be more accountable, and it also then frees up a lot of the blame. And when you can do that and then take more responsibility, and somebody might say, well, it's all his fault or it's all her fault, that's typically a red flag. And by the way, I've been guilty of that. I still work. These are core issues for all of us. They're very universal. We all have this experience in our lives. I've yet to meet anybody who didn't. So what I love to do is help people dispel the fallacy of uniqueness. Like, oh, Gary, I'm going crazy. No, you're not going crazy. I mean, unless they actually are
Yeah.
psychotic.
They actually have a psychotic break, right?
I really don't see much of that in my practice anymore. And if I do, I triage and I send, I will refer out to another level of care that I think somebody's more qualified than I am. And I also have psychiatrists I work with. I mean, most of my patients are not medicated, but a few of them are, and I have good colleagues I work with. So, sometimes that can be the issue, particularly when working with mood disorders. Um, so I hope that was helpful, or a helpful response.
Oh, I think it was. So I guess a corollary question to that would be, how do you measure outcomes, right? How does somebody know? I mean, obviously, if they feel better, that's probably at least one outcome. But is it always just about fixing problems? How do you measure success in therapy? How does somebody know what the terminus point is? Like, am I going to need therapy indefinitely for the rest of my life? Is this a short, like, one session thing, 1 month thing, 1 year thing? How does somebody know what they're even getting into, and how do you measure outcomes?
So, kind of two questions in there. How long and how do I measure outcomes? When people say to me, Gary, how long is this going to take? What I've learned over the decades is I haven't a flipping clue. I have no idea how long this is going to take. I don't know you. I'm just meeting you. I know what the presenting problems are that you've said that you're reporting, and certainly we can work on those. And if I think I'm appropriate and a good fit for you, and you think I'm a good fit for you, I'm happy to help you work with that. But in terms of how long it's going to take, I've worked with people for 1 or 2 sessions. I've worked with people for 10, 20, 30 years. Um, they don't need me as a therapist and for their own survival. Nobody in my practice really does. 95% of the people I work with don't need therapy. And when I say need, like because they're in such a compromised position, they literally cannot function. The vast majority of people who come to me, they may be in a crisis, but they just simply want to improve the quality of their lives. They could live without me. They could live without a therapist, but they want more. They're no longer satisfied with the status quo. The status quo for them is no longer fulfilling, and they're seeing the limitations of whether that happens to be in their lives. So then I guess the answer, the second part to your question, Justin, is, how do you know when they've completed a body of work? And I think that's really more for them to decide than for me to decide. Um, I remember, and I learned this lesson early on. I was working with a guy for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and I hadn't worked with anybody that long before. And I said, so, we'll just call him John. And I said, John, we've worked for, a few years together. Do you think maybe it's time to terminate? And what are your thoughts about that? We seem to have accomplished the goals that you had when you first came here, and some new goals that we discovered. And he said, "Why would I do that?" And I go, "I don't understand." He goes, "Gary, I run a business with over 10,000 employees. I've got an accountant who's been with me for 20 years, and I stay with my accountant of 20 years because he brings value to my life.
Yeah.
You bring value to my life. Why would I stop seeing you? Am I in a crisis? No, but I get something from you almost every single session we have. So I don't care about the amount of time I spend here. That's just an ego question. You're a therapist. You should know better." And I went, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I see your point. And it was at that point I realized it's really up to them to decide. If somebody feels like having me, or if somebody like me in the presence of their lives is adding quality and value to their life, then time goes out the window. This it's simply a matter of if they feel like they're getting value, great. Some people say, well, they're too dependent upon you. I go, you know what? They can function without me. They now want something different. They want me around to maybe bounce issues off of. Hey, I got this issue at work, or this new thing just emerged, or I've been working for several years, but now my kids are starting to empty the nest, and I don't know what to do with my life. So I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. So I don't think of therapy anymore in terms of time. I just don't. I think of quality of life, and I let them decide.
Interesting way to put it. But that, I mean, that makes sense at the end of the day. Like
It's not your typical response.
no,
There are some people who have certain things. Oh, you know what? I will cure you in 10 to 12 sessions. You know,
yeah, I don't even know how you could predict that, right?
Well, there are certain modalities of therapy in certain situations that actually do work in a time limited basis where you can do really short term, and I do some of that. I will do short term, very targeted, very focused psychotherapy for a specific one or two problems. And for some of that, people only need one or two or three sessions, and that's fine. But the issue of time is just it's a non sequitur for me.
What would be a one or two session type deal if I can ask that question? Because now I'm just
Of
curious.
course, yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I can't reveal names or anything.
Oh no, obviously.
I remember early on in my practice, it was a great question. It's bringing back actually a very fond memory. So I had this young couple come to me. I think they were 18 or 19 years old. They had been high school sweethearts, and they fell in love in I think middle school, and dated throughout high school and got married. And so they came to me and I said, "So how can I help?" And I think I was still an intern at this point in time. And they said, "Well, you know, we really do love one another, but we realized we got married too young." And I go, "Okay. So what tells you you got married too young? Other people got married at 18 or 19." And they said, "Well, we kind of feel like each of us, and we love one another, but we kind of feel like we should go out and we should have other life experiences, and maybe we'll get together after that. But both of our families are really invested in us staying married." And I go, "Yes, but this is your marriage. You get to decide, what you want to do with it and what that means to you." And they said, "Well, we just need somebody to give us permission to do what we know what we need to do." And I said, "Well, you don't need my permission, but if you want it, I'll give you. You have my permission. You can go ahead and end your marriage and go your separate ways. And maybe at some point down the road, you either reunite or maybe you'll find other people that you feel more compatible with. Although you guys seem like you're pretty compatible, but you want to go out and have life experiences. So if you need an adult to tell you that, go do that." Uh, and they look so happy and relieved when I just said that to them. And I take exception to the part where people say therapists shouldn't give advice. Eh, I think sometimes people want some guidance, and you know you don't want them to totally depend upon you for every decision they're going to make. But I just view it as consultation. So that was my guidance. So they said thank you. They went ahead. I think they got their marriage annulled. I think it was soon enough where they could do that. About 8 or 9 years goes by, and I get a call from what I thought was the ex-wife, and she said, both, I'm going to call them Jim and Mary. She said, we've been doing, we actually went off. We dated other people. We lived with other people. We had other experiences, and we've reconnected. And we've decided we want to get married, and we would like to do some premarital counseling with you. And so we did that for a while, and they now have 4 children and have been married. I talked to them recently. They just called for a checkup. And they've been married for, I don't know, I think it's like about not quite 30 years. So,
That's a very interesting account.
so there's your one session, and there's
Okay.
been other examples of 1, 2, 3 sessions, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And there's also examples on the other end, 20, 30 years. And it's fine. Whatever people want, whatever they need.
So speaking of 20, 30 years, you've been practicing for a while, and I have to say the whole world has changed in the last 20 or 30 years. Um,
That's for sure.
I mean, the biggest changes are the internet, the social media, they are all pervasive. They follow you around on the magic little black rectangle that fits in your pocket, and we all just kind of worship on a daily basis, right?
Sure.
Um, and I'm
Privacy.
sure, especially from a therapy perspective, you have probably seen some major changes and some major trends developing, particularly around social media. What kinds of issues are you seeing arise? How do you help people deal with those issues?
So, I mean, I guess the first thing that comes to my mind, Justin, is the addictive nature of social media, the addictive nature of our little, as you say, our little black boxes here. Um, the brain wants that dopamine hit, and this is a way to get a dopamine hit. Is, oh gee, how many likes did I get, or how many followers, how many influencers, how many, all that stuff. And I kind of call that as self-esteem by proxy. We're dependent
Yeah.
upon others for that affirmation, right? And I'm not saying I'm not above that. I like to hear an attaboy, and like anybody else. I can't say I'm fully actualized and I don't need anybody's approval or words of affirmation. I do. Um, but it's at the point when we become addicted to it. And I think social media has done that. I think a lot of the electronic age in general has done that. And of course, the big emerging, elephant in the room now is AI. Uh,
Yeah.
and there's aspects of AI. It's interesting. I just did an interview for a research firm who wanted to understand how AI might be impacting mental health. And then this is a firm in London. And we did what was going to be about an hour Zoom call, and it turned out to be about a 2.5 hour interview. And we were discussing the pros and the cons of the use of AI in mental health and therapy in particular. And I said, here's where I land with it. And my own view may or may not change, but where I land with it currently is this. I don't use AI in my sessions. I take notes in real time. And a lot of my younger colleagues have said to me, but Dr. Brown, why don't you let, X company that you can you, you know, contract with, and they'll do all your progress notes for your patients. And then you won't have to write anything. You just have to sign your name. And I go, really? So where does this recording belong? Well, it's in the cloud. I go, well, the cloud is a server farm somewhere. And if the server farm gets breached, because it's not encrypted enough or somebody's finding a way around the encryption, then the identity of your patient could be known and what they say could be known. And then, and there's been ample evidence of breaches of healthcare records. So I don't use modern technology in terms of as it relates to direct patient care. Um, the science has evolved and in ways that I like. So if I'm starting to write an article, I might do some research using ChatGPT, and I do. And I will use it for that function, but I will not use it as it relates to direct patient care. I owe it to the people I work for, whether they're famous or not, to provide them with the greatest amount of privacy that I possibly can. And so that's where I land with the current science as it relates to social media. Well, I should add a little bit with parents. I really encourage them to limit their children's time because children are losing the ability to have actual direct human interaction. They think all their relationships are being happening here, and they're not developing social skills. And
Yeah.
COVID really highlighted this because now our children, students are now at home in front of a screen. They don't even have the benefit of person to person contact with their peers. This was highly destructive to mental health for children and really put a lot of children back developmentally, both socially, psychologically, and academically. So I'm not a fan.
We personally, we have 5 kids, and we've done what we can to limit exposure. Although there's definitely other families in our circle that are uh, don't know the word I want to use, far more Luddite than we are, right? Our kids have a video game system and they have what like none of our kids until they hit 18 have a phone. We have one like kids
Oh,
phone that our kids all have to share, which of course also makes it so they don't have social media accounts, and even if they did, like they wouldn't be posting anything problematic because
right.
all of their siblings and their parents have access to that phone. So there are
Sure.
some simple low tech workarounds, but yeah, it's I don't know. I don't know what the solution is because there is such, I mean, we're having a conversation right now using technology and
Sure.
it's going to go out on social media and hopefully it'll get seen by people and they'll get likes and shares. I mean, everyone wants that to be sure. And it's a valuable way to get good information in front of people. I view this podcast as a way to get the information of who you are in front of potentially people that could be using your services. You know, licensed marriage and family counseling in Los Angeles or somewhere in that neck of the woods, right? And that's important. But yeah, there has to come a time. I remember hearing stories that was it back when he was still alive, Steve Jobs wouldn't let his kids interact with any of the actual products his company made because he
Right.
recognized how addictive they were. And I don't know what the solution is. And if the solution can't, I don't think it can be a top-down solution. It has to be almost a an organic grassroots awakening of the individual to say, I need to stop this.
No, I mean, it's this technology is really seductive. You know, these companies, I won't name them by name, but these social media companies, they pay neuropsychologists and behavioral psychologists millions of dollars a year to help them promote this addiction. So I'm a bit of on a jihad about this. I think it's done a really huge disservice. Um, and I just think we need to be very careful about the cultural norms that we're establishing right now. It's a little bit scary to me, frankly. But I am encouraged because young parents are beginning to see some of the limitations of this. On the one hand, these electronic devices are great babysitting devices, but and on the other hand, um, you know, they have their limitations. You know, and we've talked about that a bit here.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's a weird world that we live in. Any other big changes coming down the pike technologically, in what you do? I mean, obviously you mentioned AI and some people use it and some people don't. Are there any other big, uh, groundbreaking, earth-shaking, sorry if that's a California pun, uh,
No,
changes
no
in the trend?
problem. It's all right, dude. No, can't believe I said
What's coming down the pipeline, technology-wise
sure.
in your realm?
So, in the field of mental health and psychotherapy specifically, uh, again, there's great research happening with AI, and so you know, I'm a big fan of it from there. Um, I was with a patient the other day, and she was wanting some tips on how to do something. So I said, so here's some different strategies you could use. See what you like that works. And she said, well, funny, you know, I was using ChatGPT yesterday and it said everything that you just said. You know, so why do I need you? And I go, well, maybe you don't need me. You know, maybe you can have a relationship with a robot, and that's okay. You know, if you think that's going to work for you, but ask yourself this: do they know you? They've given you a formula, but do they know you? Can they empathize with you? Can AI read your body language? Can AI hear your tone of voice? Can AI see your facial expressions? And I would suggest to you that AI can be helpful with giving you some tips, but it doesn't know you specifically. You are a unique individual amongst 8 billion of us. And there will never be a chat GBT or robot in any form that's going to totally be able to know you. So give that some thought. The very next week, she comes back to me and she said, I really heard what you said. I'm still using it, but it also gave me some advice that doesn't fit for me. And now I understand what you're talking about.
Huh. Speaking of body language, etc., and we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. You talked about, COVID, obviously something we all lived through. It's hard to believe that was 5 years ago, but that was 5 years ago.
Well,
Um,
it's still happening. I had a colleague die last month from it.
yeah, I
But,
mean,
but
the
it's
the
endemic. I mean,
lockdowns and
yeah, the number
and
of fatalities is definitely lowering.
yeah, no, and thankfully too, right? And hopefully we don't see anything like that again coming down the pipeline. Um, I
You're
talked to
listening
a lot of
out
people
there, Justin.
that had to knock on
Yeah,
wood, um, that had to shift their practices. I talked to attorneys that had to zoom into, to hearings and stuff, and it made me question whether a Zoom hearing would ever even work, or a Zoom trial. And a lot of them had the same concept. The attorneys say, well, part of what really makes what I do work is when I can work the jury, so to speak, right? So I'm prosecution, I'm defense, whatever, and the opposing side says something that I know is just BS, and I'm
okay.
able to look and make eye contact with a juror, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and I know he knows what I know, and we just connected in an interesting way. And I'm curious, in your realm, if you had a lot of people that moved to Zoom therapy, and is it are there detractions to doing Zoom therapy? Is it better to have them in the room? Is it functionally the same thing because the most important part is the concepts you're talking about? You know, what role does physicality, I guess, play in therapy? Is it like, just a 5% of the whole package? Is it really depend on the scenario? It's just a thought that occurred to me, but I'm really kind of curious given what you just said.
Um, I'm kind of split on this. I've only seen two people in my practice in my office since March 16th of 2020 when they started the lockdowns. I still keep my office. I use it for administrative. I use it for a variety of things. Go do research, read projects I'm working on, just administrative stuff.
Indoor driving range.
But what people really like about it, I can't get a driving range. Maybe in the hallway I can do something.
Yeah.
Just a long hallway. A low tiger stinger.
Sorry. Anyway, continue.
No, it's okay. What what my patients have told me is, Gary, I love seeing you in person, but I really love that I don't have to drive an hour back and forth to your office in Westwood. I don't have to deal with the traffic. I can sit here from the convenience of my own home. I save time. Um, and I just really appreciate that you are offering this. Out of my entire patient load, I only had one person who stopped therapy because of Zoom, and ultimately he came back, and he saw the benefits. Now, I'm a hugger, so I love to get and receive a hug. I mean, assuming it's appropriate and that's something people want. That's the one thing that's missing. But I can see people's facial expressions. I can hear their tone of voice. I get enough a sense of their body language. Maybe if their foot's tapping or something, I don't see that. But there's other things you can look and hear at in terms of a person's, again, facial expression, tone of voice. So I've not really found it to be not only not a detriment, but I've in some ways there's been many pluses as a result of that.
Interesting. I have never thought about hugging a therapist before, as weird as that sounds.
Understood. And it's not for everybody. For people who want it, I give them a hug.
Well, and they've done studies that, again, talking about dopamine, right, and serotonin, physical contact causes that. And they say a hug, especially like a 20-second hug. I shared this with my 10-year-old, my little daughter, and she loves to hug. She's very cuddly. She always has been.
Yeah.
And so now oftentimes she'll come over and she'll give me a hug, and she'll just sit there and count to 20. And I just know this is my 20-second hug from my Sophia today. And it
Uh,
doesn't happen every day, but it happens pretty frequently. I just never thought about that as even an actual aspect of therapy before, but I guess it would make sense for at least for some people that would be very helpful.
so that there is this old stereotype of what therapy quote is supposed to be.
I
Um,
see Tony
and
Soprano in the with
yeah, well, they had a lot of physical contact, most of which she did not want.
this is true. I haven't actually watched all of The Sopranos, full disclosure, but
Oh
from what I
yeah,
remember.
ditto. Um, Elaine Brocka, by the way, did a fabulous job as Dr. Melfi. She did an incredible job of portraying that character. So look, there have to be appropriate, healthy boundaries to that. But we are hardwired for connection as mammals, not just as human beings, but just as mammals altogether. We're hardwired to feel connected, both physically and emotionally. So that would be a potential drawback. But again, my patients reporting me, no, this works out great. It's just so much easier to be in therapy. And for some people, they've said, I'm actually in therapy now because I don't have to drive a long distance to get to my therapist. I don't have to deal with the traffic. And I really like the comfort of being in my own home. So I'm just going with what they tell me.
Total side note, but
Sure.
I'm really curious now to get your opinion on this as well. We were just talking about the Sopranos.
Yeah.
Different people have, I talk to a lot of attorneys, and of course, I talk with a lot of injury attorneys. They're one of my main clients in my actual business, and they get the short end of the stick when it comes to popular media portrayals. The ambulance chaser, and I think they fill a really important role in society. They bring justice to people that are injured, and I think that in general they get a really bad rap. I'm curious about your view on pop culture portrayals of psychology and therapy. Are there any particular portrayals you think are really good, like from The Sopranos, or some that you think are negative or even like harmful to the concept that you're aware of? Obviously, I'm sure you don't know every single portrayal of a therapist, but what are your thoughts on?
I think some of them are really good. I think some of them suck. I'm not going to name them by name because speaking of attorneys, I don't want to get subpoenaed by one if I
Yep.
happen to, a big name Hollywood client that they have or something like that. Um, I think probably one of the best portrayals in my mind, in my heart of hearts, of what a therapist should be and can be was Judd Hirsch's portrayal of the psychiatrist in the movie Ordinary People. If you want to know about my style, um, and again, this is just my 2 cents. Somebody else might have a different idea of portrayal what a therapist should look like. But I think Judd Hirsch's portrayal of the psychiatrist in Ordinary People is probably the archetype that I would look to. Most reflects. He's human. He's conversational. He'll talk about his own issues. He sees what the core issues of the person are. In a very loving way, he helps them navigate that. He also displays a lot of courage. He will say things, he said things as a therapist that the stereotypical therapist, at least as they're portrayed, would not say. And I guess this goes to another point. I think it takes a lot of courage for someone to go to a therapist. And they don't talk about this a lot or enough, at least when I was in graduate school. I think it takes tremendous courage to come and talk to a total stranger and reveal some of the most intimate, private details of one's life. And I don't take that trust for granted, not one bit. And I also think it takes courage on the part of the therapist. And this is what I really liked. And I saw this movie when I was interning, and it was really formative for me. And I went, that's what I want to be as a therapist. But it also requires courage on my part to maybe sometimes say things that are really uncomfortable for someone to hear. But if they know that I'm saying it in a way that's loving and they can assume my goodwill, maybe they can hear that thing that maybe they don't want to hear, but maybe they need to hear. And one of the things that people have told me they've come to see me here is they heard I'm the therapist that will tell them what they actually need to hear. And not only do I not take that for granted, there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that goes along with that in terms of how to convey that message in a way where you can share something with someone and say, I think you might have a blind spot here, and here's the impact it seems to be having on your partner, or here's the impact it might be having on you at work. Uh, and if you could look at this part, it might be helpful in your communications with whoever you're involved with in this situation. And if they can hear that in a loving way and look at themselves without blaming themselves, without shaming themselves, but just go, wow, yeah, I guess I do that. Okay, Gary, can you help me navigate this? What's a better way for me to interact with someone? That's a great payday. That's,
Yeah.
and I will talk about during sessions, I'll talk about my own limitations. I will tell people, hey, Eileen and I had this thing the other day, and at the end of the day, I came to realize that was mostly me. That was my issue. And I felt embarrassed and I felt, stupid. And I felt, so you know, just because I'm a therapist doesn't mean I don't have my own work to do, and, I'm well into my 70s and I'm still a work in progress like everybody else.
Physician, heal thyself, therapist, psychoanalyze yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't take my own medicine. So I will share not only things that have worked in my life with my patients, but I'll share with them some of the things that I've done that did not work, you know, um, where maybe I had a blind spot or I needed to do something different than what I was doing. And I think that kind of brings the humanity of it and kind of the universality of the human experience when a therapist will disclose. Now, you don't want to make a session all about you, you know, but and but I think self-disclosure on the part of the therapist helps really build trust and rapport. And they go, wow, he's got the same issues I've got. He may be dealing with them differently than I do, and maybe I need to learn about how he deals with the same stuff that I have to deal with. So
Yeah. That comedic line. That's enough of me talking about me. Now you talk about me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully this is not that, but yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you just a perfunctory question here. How do people work, right? You're based out of Los Angeles.
Yes.
You're on the kind of the west side of LA, yeah?
West LA, but I really actually since COVID I serve all of California. So
That was one of my questions is do you work even out can you work outside of the state? Have you worked with clients
no,
internationally?
um,
Like, or
I,
is it
I
because you're licensed in the area? Tell me
sure.
about that, listeners, how to contact.
I do have coaching clients outside the state of California, but within the state of California, I do some coaching, but mostly psychotherapy because this is the state I'm licensed in. So, and there's no reciprocity. California doesn't offer reciprocity outside, but hopefully that will change at some point. But yeah, since COVID, I probably 20-25% of my patient load is in either the Bay Area up in San Francisco, Orange County, um, La Jolla, Palm Desert. Um, yeah, so in addition to here, West LA and South Bay, and um, pretty much all the areas, local areas around here. Only because I work remotely,
Yeah.
is the vast majority of therapists.
Yeah, but it opens up so many possibilities, which is
Oh yeah,
it's kind of neat
yeah.
at the end.
I mean, I used
Well,
to have people drive in from Palm Desert,
yeah,
and now they don't have to do that 2-hour drive. You
yeah,
know, we would do phone sessions occasionally.
yeah. That would make sense. Well, Gary, you have been very generous with your time, and we have covered an awful lot of topics, and I'm sure we could just keep digging and digging and digging, but I want to be respectful of your time. So here in a minute, I'm going to ask you my closing question, and that closing question for my listeners is simply this. If we were to go back in time and meet a young Gary Brown, maybe pre-Dr. Gary Brown, and you could give yourself some advice other than the obvious, which is buy a lot of Bitcoin and hold it till it crosses 1K or 100K, right? But if you can give yourself some advice,
For
what
a
advice
minimum
would
of 4 years, by the way.
yeah.
Sorry, financial advice to track that.
What advice would you give yourself and why? While you're percolating on your answer to that, we're going to jump back over and take a look at your website again. So I am talking with Dr. Gary Brown. He is PhD, LMFT, FAA, ETS, and a whole bunch of other credentials as well. Licensed marriage and family therapist, working out of West LA, but serving clients all over the state of California. All right, so Gary, we travel back in time, 30 years, 40 years, I don't know. And without breaking the space-time continuum, which is, of course, something you should always be very concerned about when traveling through time, you're able to go over to yourself and just whisper a couple of words of advice in your ear. You don't have time for a giant monologue, but you can just give yourself a couple of, a piece of quick advice. What advice would you give to yourself, to young Gary from 30 or 40 or 50 years ago?
Good Lord. Um, even though
And of
you
course,
tried to
they
think about
also,
it, and you even
and
gave
don't,
me as a preview question, I still can't answer it.
yeah.
Um, I guess I have a few answers. Some of them are personal, some of them are professional, Justin. Um, Actually, one of the personal things that came up for me was uh, make make sure that you honor your need for connection with others, and make sure you honor your need for connection with yourself. And you don't have to live behind a mask. That was a big thing that happened for me. It's too long a story. But at the age of 25, I had an experience that where for 25 years, I really didn't disclose my inner world at all. Um, I either felt too ashamed or too embarrassed, or people won't like me, or they really knew this about me. And it was really nothing horrible. It was just like, I just didn't trust that I was worth loving. And then I realized I could share my inner world and people would love me. Not everybody. I don't expect everybody to love me. I'm not that much of a narcissist. Um, but you don't need everybody to love you. And so you can take chances and see who can you connect with in this world whose values are aligned with yours, in terms of the need for love, affection, the need to be connected. Um, so I would go back and I would tell little Gary as a child, you there's going to be a point in time when you're going to be the master of your own life and you can write the script for your own life. And when that happens, go for it.
That's a good
Follow
way to
your
put it.
dreams. As it relates to falling in love, because I get this question a lot. Um, Gary, tell me about falling in love. And I go, falling in love is delicious. I met Eileen and fell in love with her in 20 minutes. So I believe in love at first sight. But I also believe in the following: follow your heart, but bring your brains along for the ride. um, you know, Combine those two, and I think that would have served me better when I was younger. But the good news is I came to that realization in my mid to late 20s, and that was really helpful. And
You
remember,
came to that conclusion in enough time.
yeah, and life takes courage,
Yeah.
you know. But if we display courage and if we're willing to look inward, uh, gosh, so much of the world opens, so many possibilities open up for people. I love seeing people realize, oh my God, I didn't realize I could have a life this good. I had no idea. I had no concept that I could be feeling what I'm feeling. And when I hear that, that's just a great payday.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm answered your question here, Dustin, but that's where I want.
That works. It absolutely works. Well, I always like to let my guests have the final word. Do you have any parting thoughts of wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with, Gary?
Um, I can't think of anything else other than what's happened in this interview. And Justin, I want to thank you for this interview. Um, I've done a number of interviews for media locally and nationally, and but you're a great interviewer. This is absolutely a pleasure. And I really want to thank you for this. You're very much like me. You're just kind of conversational. And I felt very relaxed with you. Really enjoy, and I'm glad I kept that email from 8 years ago. And I went, because I knew at some point in time you and I were going to connect again. And here we are. So thank you. I hope I did a good job for you, and I hope I did a good job for
That's
you.
the other piece of advice you give to yourself, right? Hey, you're going to get an email from this guy. Hold on. Well, this has been Local Leader TV. I am your host, as always, Justin West. I've been talking with Dr. Gary Brown. Before I wrap up, I do want to remind our listeners that the information shared in today's conversation is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional therapy or counseling advice. If you're seeking professional therapy, please consult with a licensed therapist or mental health professional in your area. Each individual situation is unique, and a trained professional can help provide you tailored guidance. But if you're in the Los Angeles area or anywhere in California, really, I think that Dr. Gary Brown would be a wonderful resource for you. So again, down below, we will have links to his website. You can go online, GaryBrownTherapy.com. You can fill out the form to request an appointment or learn more about him and his services. I think it'd be really great. If you're watching our podcast, we always do appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're on any of the podcast repositories, please feel free to rate us and review us as well. And the most important thing is if you know somebody after listening to this podcast that could benefit from the knowledge in this podcast, please share this with them. That's the number one thing that helps this channel grow, but also helps people get the help that they need. So if you know someone, particularly in the California area, that's dealing with a marital stress issue or a trauma issue or whatever it happens to be, please feel free to share this with them as well. And until next time, this is Justin signing off. Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk soon.